As the search for Zion Foster continues, her mother, Sierra Milton, says she's gripping with the reality that her daughter won't be found alive. The grieving mother told CW50 Zion's cousin, accused by authorities of lying to peace officers in the investigation, allegedly made a shocking confession that he dumped the 17-year-old after she went unresponsive on the same night she was last seen.
Like trash. Put my baby in a dumpster. And then afterward proceeded to go get his girlfriend from work and carry on with life as if nothing happened.
After finishing her shift at the Detroit Wing Company, 17-year-old Zion Foster asked her mother for permission to visit her older cousin, Jaylin Brazier, on Detroit's west side. Zion and Jaylin had a close bond, frequently texting, watching TV, and spending time together. On the night of January 4th, 2022, Zion's mother, Sierra, allowed her to hang out with her favorite cousin, Jaylin, trusting he would bring her back home safely. However, tragically that night was the last time Zion Foster's family saw her beautiful face. This is a Sleuthy summary for synopses and case updates. For detailed deep dives, please check out my playlists. But first, a big thank you to MyHeritage for sponsoring today's video. As someone deeply interested in where I come from, researching my family history has been incredibly rewarding. I've always heard stories told in my family about my Creole and African ancestors, and probably like many of you, I've also heard the stories about having Native American ancestry too. But now, thanks to MyHeritage, I can pinpoint exactly where these stories come from. Learning about my ancestors has given me a newfound pride and confidence, and with my love for researching things, naturally, I've become one of my family's ancestry historians. MyHeritage is the leading global service for family history research and DNA testing. Trusted by 90 million users, it makes building your family tree simple and so much fun. With over 20 billion historical documents available, it's amazing to see how much you can discover, whether you're finding new relatives or tracing your roots back through history. One of the most exciting features is called Instant Discoveries. Check this out. With just one click, I can add 40 new people to my family tree because MyHeritage already had the information from relatives' trees. I even found a record of my great-great-great-grandmother that I never knew existed. I found her here with my great-aunt Agnes and her godson Walter. Some time ago, my mom told me about Walter's regular visits during summers, and lo and behold, here they are together on the 1920 census. If Mom hadn't told me about him before this, I probably would have questioned whether this was the right record. My maman, as we call our grandmothers in Louisiana, has been so hard to locate on census records. I had almost given up. I can't believe I finally found her. And it's not just about the names and dates. MyHeritage has advanced AI technologies for repairing, enhancing, colorizing, and even animating old photos. You can start building your family tree and discover your origins today. Sign up for a 14-day free trial using the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. January 4th, 2022. On the evening of January 4th, around 10 p.m., Jaylin Brazier, Zion's favorite cousin, dropped his girlfriend Katrina off at work in Hazel Park, a suburb of Detroit. Immediately after, he texted Zion, asking if she wanted to come over to smoke, something they often did together. When Zion received the message, she asked her mother Sierra for permission to go. Although Sierra didn't approve of Zion smoking, she valued their honesty pact and trusted Zion with her older cousin Jaylin. Reluctantly, she allowed Zion to go. Zion quickly replied yes to Jaylin's invitation. Then at 10:45 p.m., Jaylin's white Acura was captured on a neighbor's surveillance camera pulling into the driveway next door to Zion's house. This was unusual since Jaylin had visited Zion's home a few times before and usually parked in her driveway. It was suspected that Jaylin wanted to keep this visit secret, as he hadn't informed his live-in girlfriend Katrina that he was bringing Zion over that night. When Jaylin arrived, Zion met him outside, and together they left East Point. Shortly after, Zion's boyfriend, Vertez, received a text from Zion confirming she was in the car with Jaylin. Vertez knew that Jaylin was Zion's favorite cousin, and although he felt somewhat skeptical and perhaps a bit jealous of their close relationship, he accepted it. It took about 30 minutes to get to Jaylin's place. At 11:16 p.m., Jaylin and Zion were captured on a neighbor's camera entering Jaylin's home on Greenfield Road. Once inside, Zion sent a text to Vertez confirming she had arrived safely. And due to their practice of sharing phone locations, Vertez, out of an abundance of caution, took a screenshot of her location at 11:24 p.m. The screenshot showed Zion was near Greenfield Road and Vassar Drive, where Jaylin's home is located. Around 40 minutes passed, and it was a few minutes after midnight. Vertez texted Zion asking, "What time are you going home?" Zion quickly responded, "We finna smoke again." She then tried to FaceTime Vertez, but the call didn't go through. So at 12:09 a.m., she sent him a screenshot as proof she tried to call. In the FaceTime screenshot, Zion is pictured seated on a couch in front of a wall that detectives would later confirm was indeed inside Jaylin's home. A few minutes later, at 12:23 a.m., Jaylin's girlfriend Katrina texted him, "But how's your high?" 13 minutes later, Jaylin responded, "Relaxing AF. Actually fell asleep." Shortly before 1 a.m., Vertez and Zion had a phone conversation. He said Zion sounded strange. She wasn't making sense and seemed unusually tired. After they hung up at 12:59 a.m., Vertez received a text from Zion saying, "OMW home," meaning on my way home. However, that was the last time anyone heard from Zion. Vertez tried contacting Zion again, but there was no answer. So he began texting incessantly just to make sure she was okay, but still, no response. He grew increasingly worried that something was wrong. During their conversation, Zion had sounded strange and unusually tired, and now, just 9 minutes later, she wasn't answering her phone at all. At 1:21 a.m., Vertez texted Zion, "I'm pissed because you let your phone die," assuming this because his calls were going straight to voicemail. Meanwhile, Katrina had been texting Jaylin since he dropped her off at work, complaining she was feeling sick and wanted to come home. At 1:25 a.m., she texted him, "I think I need to come home. I don't feel good." 3 minutes later at 1:28, Jaylin responded, "You can make it, baby." 4 minutes later, Katrina texted again, "My stomach hurts, and I keep getting hot and cold." This time, 40 minutes would pass before Jaylin responded. Finally, at 2:12 a.m., he texted, "Okay, baby, do you want me to come now?" According to the prosecutors and surveillance camera footage from a neighbor across the street, Jaylin was very busy during this time. By 1:47 a.m., Jaylin's car had changed its position in the driveway. Initially, it was parked front end first, but now it had been backed in. At 1:48 a.m., Jaylin was seen walking out the front door of his home alone. And then the car light came on as he got inside. At 1:49 a.m., Jaylin was seen driving away. Zion never walked out of Jaylin's home. Prosecutors believe that this is when Jaylin loaded Zion's body from the back door of his house into the trunk of his car. His phone was tracked to a parking lot in Highland Park, which was mostly empty except for several large dumpsters, big enough to fit human remains. Jaylin's phone stayed in the area of the parking lot for about 7 minutes. Detectives obtained footage showing a white car matching Jaylin's at the dumpsters from 2 a.m. to 2:05 a.m. A person was seen on the video at the trunk of the vehicle, making a heaving motion toward the dumpster. Jaylin later confessed that he put Zion in the primarily green dumpster that night.
The video of this particular vehicle was shown to Sergeant Ford, correct?
Yes.
Okay. This particular segment of the clip, correct?
Correct.
Okay. There was not another segment of this video that was shown depicting January the 6th, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you had an opportunity to review this particular video, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you feel it could be Jaylin Brazier's car?
I from what I remember from the description of his car and seeing photos, evidence photos, he had dark rims, and that's not consistent with that.
Okay, I would agree to that, but nevertheless, after those conversations that you had with Sergeant Ford and the prosecution, this particular video was shown to the jury, suggesting that this could be Jaylin Brazier's car.
I think the suggestion was that a vehicle showed up at the same time. He could have been in the passenger seat. He could have been in the back seat. He could have just drove by.
Oh, okay. That was an ask of Sergeant Ford, though, correct? You would agree to that, right?
Well, it is possible at the same exact time his phone puts him there that a vehicle shows up at the dump site.
Okay.
Jaylin's defense attorney asserted that the white car on the tape wasn't Jaylin's, arguing that Jaylin's tires were distinctly different. However, by 2:06 a.m., Jaylin's phone was tracked traveling back to his Greenfield residence. And by the time he sent the 2:12 a.m. text message to Katrina, "Okay, baby, do you want me to come now?" he was already back at home. Likely stalling and cleaning up, Jaylin then texted, "I'll hop in the shower to kick this high off," despite having already driven to the dumpsters. 9 minutes later, he texted Katrina saying their cat Nyla had scratched his neck. Katrina replied, "What do you mean? She was walking over you?" Jaylin answered, "I was trying to tickle her stomach and she beat my ass." When the detectives reviewed the records, they found that Zion's phone stopped communicating with the T-Mobile network at 1:15 a.m., logging no further activity. To them, it was inconceivable that Zion would simultaneously go unconscious and stop communicating at the same time her phone ceased all activity. They believed this was orchestrated. Additionally, when detectives seized Jaylin's phone, they discovered that on January 7th, just one day after Zion disappeared, and despite Jaylin telling police he had no idea where she was, he had performed a factory reset, deleting all data from his phone. It appeared that in the same way he disposed of her body, Jaylin was trying to erase any evidence linking him to her disappearance. The next day, when Sierra and Vertez realized that Zion had not returned home, their worry turned to panic. Naturally, they turned to Jaylin for answers. However, Jaylin called Sierra and claimed he hadn't seen Zion in months or even years. He suggested that she might be down the street and expressed annoyance as she might be using his house as an alibi. As their concerns grew, Sierra made a formal complaint with the East Point police. Unfortunately, the family quickly became frustrated by the slow pace of the investigation. Zion had been reported as a runaway before, and the officers didn't initially take the complaint seriously. Determined to find Zion, the family took matters into their own hands. They organized search teams and scoured their East Point neighborhood, eventually extending their search to Jaylin's neighborhood. They even camped out outside Jaylin's front door. Jaylin appeared cooperative, putting out flyers, participating in search efforts, and even inviting Zion's mother over to view his surveillance footage to prove that Zion had not been there. However, when Sierra arrived to review the footage, she noticed something strange.
What was the sort of contact that you had? Did you text him? Did you talk to him? Did you see him personally?
Initially it was a phone call.
Okay.
He called me and he told me, I don't know why Zion would lie. I haven't seen Zion in years or months. I just haven't seen her. I wouldn't even be around her. Like, what am I supposed to do with that, you know? And then he told me, I have a child on the way. I wouldn't be trying to get into any type of anything. I don't know where she would be at. And then there was the invitation to come over and check the ring camera.
Okay. And do you remember which day you went over to look at his camera? Was it early on?
It was early on.
Okay.
Probably about the 6, 7, somewhere around in there.
And what was his sort of stated purpose of him having you over to look at the cameras?
To prove that Zion was not ever there.
Okay. And can you explain to the jury, just in general terms, like what his camera system was like, what you were able to, just how you were able to look at it, if you can?
Yes. It's a monitor with buttons that are on the side, and on the monitor there are blocks of time with videos of it, and they're one after another. And if you touch one, you can see the time span in which that footage is happening. And so there is, as an example, 9 to 10 o'clock, 10 to 11 o'clock, 12 to 1 o'clock, things like that.
And so
everything is consecutive.
when you were looking at that monitor directly, is that correct?
Yes.
And when you looked at that, did you look at times corresponding to January 4th and January 5th of 2022?
I did look for them.
Were there any that you saw?
No.
Okay.
But he had already removed the blocks of time in which Zion was there.
During one of the family's search rallies, held just steps outside of Jaylin's home, a neighbor across the street revealed her surveillance footage to Sierra. The footage showed Jaylin and Zion entering Jaylin's home, but only Jaylin coming out. This pivotal revelation led the East Point police to issue a missing persons alert for Zion Foster on January 10, 2022. And not only did the Detroit police get involved, but so did the Michigan State Police and the FBI.
Tuesday, okay. Most weeks, my mom sitting outside the times when I left, when I took her to work and we came back, went to get gas. Just basically showing this girl was never in my house. So we really.
When approached by the detectives, Jaylin initially claimed it had been years since he last saw Zion, and that she often used his house as an alibi when she was actually at some dude's house down the street. However, a search of Jaylin's car revealed that a cadaver dog detected the odor of human remains in the trunk. Now under immense pressure, 9 days later, Jaylin eventually turned himself in and changed his story. He claimed that Zion stopped breathing for an unknown reason while they were smoking marijuana together. Jaylin's story would change many times over the following days. Ultimately, he said he panicked when he found his cousin dead, so he took her body to a dumpster in Lenox Township.
Which caused you to do what? Because I'm going to tell you right now, you did something to her physically. I can tell when we were talking about it before.
No, I did not physically hurt her or anything. At all. At all. I wouldn't have at all. I started checking her breath, like I said, and it was just declining, basically. I waited about 15 to 20 minutes, and then it was nothing. She had no responses at all.
If we find her, we find trauma like manual strangulation or something, then we're screwed.
He admitted that instead of calling 911, he put her body into the trunk of his car and drove to a parking lot with dumpsters, placing her body in the primarily green one. Prosecutors and Zion's family questioned whether Zion was actually dead when she was thrown into the dumpster.
And she could have still been breathing when you put her in the dumpster. You realize it, right?
Days later, Jaylin altered his story again, this time saying that LSD was what killed her. He then got on a recorded jail line and claimed he made those statements because his lawyer advised him to say those things to reduce the pressure of the murder investigation. After changing his story, Jaylin was charged and convicted with lying to a police officer in a violent crime investigation and for lying to a peace officer. On March 30th, 2022, Jaylin made an appearance in the 38th District Court. He accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 23 months to 4 years in prison for lying during the investigation of Zion's disappearance. Without Zion's body, more severe charges could not have been filed.
A group of Detroit police officers dedicated their entire summer to searching for Zion's body in a Macomb County landfill, but never found her. Chief White says DPD's investigation is not over.
That case is still wide open. We think we've got a strong suspect for that case. Our detectives are constitutionally doing everything they can to talk to him, investigate him, visit with him, to make sure that we get what we need to charge that case the way it needs to be charged.
In the meantime, no body means no determination as to how Foster died, and no closure for a mother still mourning and still desperate for answers.
In October 2022, A weeks-long search for Zion's body at Lenox Township landfill yielded no results. Months pass, and Zion's body still had not been found. Then in January 2023, after serving just 10 months, Jaylin was released for good behavior and for completing a boot camp program while in prison. The news of his early release shocked and enraged Zion's family.
Hey guys, Jaylin Brazier was admitted into a special program, essentially a boot camp program, which opens the door for an early release for those who successfully complete it.
This is absurd, it's unfair, and it's not just.
Sierra Milton is reeling over the release of Jaylin Brazier, who's likely the last person to see her daughter alive. Brazier was released from prison Tuesday, 9 months after he was sentenced for lying to investigators about Zion Foster's disappearance.
Why is this man free? What? I can admit to this and still be let free.
I was on panic mode ever since that happened. Her mom at one point talked to me, and I couldn't bring myself, like, your daughter just died. What do I do?
Brazier was sentenced to 23 months to 4 years in prison for lying to police, but ended up spending 9 months behind bars. His early release, the result of a 90-day special alternative incarceration program, which Macomb County Judge Edward Servito approved.
That boggles my mind for the judge to give a more aggressive term because of hearing the case and finding out what Jaylin said he did. It could be signed off and I not be notified.
More than a year passed following Zion's disappearance. However, detectives continued their investigation into Jaylin. Then on June 13, 2023, 5 months after his release, he was charged with second-degree murder and tampering with evidence in relation to his missing cousin. Prosecutors anticipated an uphill challenge in securing a conviction without a body, but they believed they had a strong case. His murder trial began Tuesday, May 7, 2024. The prosecutor called a medical examiner to the stand who had not only reviewed Zion's medical history, but also refuted Jaylin's claims about how she died. The symptoms he detailed didn't line up.
And based on your review of both the summaries of the statements that you received about the defendant's statements and the transcripts of those statements themselves, can you opine as to whether there's any sort of medical plausibility to the claims that were made about Zion's passing?
Well, the comments did not make any medical sense when trying to consider why an asymptomatic, otherwise healthy 17-year-old would die suddenly. The conditions that could have resulted in her death, like the asthma, the circumstances that were described did not fit. If she was having a cardiac event, she would have been experiencing palpitations, chest pain. That was not in the circumstances. The drugs that she was known to have used, the LSD and the marijuana, could not have caused her death in any way. Other drugs like the opiates, the time frame that was described in the circumstances did not make sense. So in other words, the behavior that was described in the passage of time does not make sense in why she would have died.
The prosecutor presented several text messages suggesting that Jaylin wanted more than an innocent cousin relationship with Zion. The messages revealed his inappropriate conduct, often containing suggestive messages about what he wanted to do with her sexually. But when Zion responded with repulsion about these messages, Jaylin pretended they were mistakenly sent to her and that they were intended for someone else.
You will hear that on the very last night of Zion's life, she made a mistake. She placed her trust in the defendant, her step cousin, who is by all accounts her favorite cousin. But you will see that there was something off about their relationship. In text messages that were unearthed in one of Zion's old phones, you will see that they communicated with each other continuously. when the defendant was 23 years old, Zion was 17 years old. They exchanged a lot of text messages that were sexualized, where the defendant shared vivid and graphic details about his sex life with his 17 or 16-year-old cousin. You will see through these messages that he moved closer and closer into her life, and that on January 4th of 2022, he took things a step further. Late that night, he brought Zion over to his house. They were alone. Just the defendant's 2 young children were asleep upstairs. Zion left the defendant's house that night in the trunk of his car.
The prosecutor theorized that something physical occurred that night, and Zion likely fought back, resulting in the scratches on Jaylin's neck, scratches he made sure to explain away to his girlfriend Katrina before picking her up from work that night.
You're going to see that at 2:21 a.m., just minutes after getting home from putting Zion Foster's body in a dumpster, the defendant texted Katrina Smith claiming that their cat scratched his neck. He claimed that he was trying to tickle the cat, and the cat, quote unquote, beat his ass.
And although Jaylin factory reset his phone, detectives also seized Katrina's phone, which helped them recover some of the missing communications and gaps in Jaylin's activities. Prosecutors believe Zion was murdered between 1 a.m. and 1:28 a.m., the early morning of January 5, 2022. During this time, Zion suddenly stopped responding. Her phone ceased logging records on her mobile carrier's network, and Jaylin delayed his responses to Katrina, his pregnant girlfriend, who knew nothing about Zion being there, who wanted to come home early because she wasn't feeling well. However, Jaylin refused her request to come home. Jaylin's defense strategy focused on providing alternative explanations for the evidence, pretending that the cat scratched him. His defense attorney argued that the white car seen in the surveillance footage near the dumpsters was not Jaylin's, pointing out that the tires were distinctly different from the ones on his car. Jaylin claimed he panicked and disposed of her body rather than calling 911, later suggesting that LSD might have been involved in her death. The defense attempted to assert that Zion had a history of seizures, that was more likely the cause of her death. Jaylin's strategy was to deny that any of it was his fault, that he merely panicked. Despite these strategies, after just 30 minutes of deliberation, the jury found the evidence and the prosecution's case compelling enough to convict 25-year-old Jaylin of second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. And because he took advantage of Zion's admiration and naivete and never accepted responsibility for his actions throughout the trial, the judge handed down the maximum sentence. Jaylin was sentenced to 38 to 90 years for the murder charge and 5 to 10 years for the tampering charge, with sentences to be served consecutively. Immediately following the verdict, Zion's father, James, had a message for the jury. "Thank you. You saved a lot of lives today. You saved a lot of families from heartbreak and misery," he said. He also had some choice words for Jaylin. "You thought you were smart. You tried to be slick. The people saw you for what you are."
The fact of the matter is that she was loved. She is loved. She was fought for. And this is the result. So I'm happy that in the end, this is justice.
Rest in peace, Zion Foster. What do you think about the verdict? I've received more questions about the outcome of this case than any other I've covered. Now that it has come to a final decision, do you think the sentence was fair? During the trial, the defense objected, saying that the white car seen at the dumpsters wasn't Jaylin's. If in fact he assaulted her as prosecutors theorize, wouldn't it be much more likely that he misdirected the authorities to the wrong dumpster? Do you think Jaylin told the truth about where he actually placed Zion's body? Let's continue the conversation down in the comments section below. As always, I'll meet you there. And again, thank you, My Heritage, for sponsoring this video. Keeping track of family is important. So don't wait to start building your family tree. Dive into your family history today. Try it free for 14 days. Trust me, You'll be amazed.